The badges that walked in weren't the problem. It was the certainty behind them. But the Collins twins didn't blink. Wyatt stayed still. Wren counted exits. By the time the room realized who they were, it wasn't a standoff anymore. It was a lesson. Before the story begins, comment your city, hit subscribe, and brace yourself. What happens next is more than just a story. It's an experience. It's a wind-cut Friday night in Flagstaff, Arizona, where the high desert air carries pine and cold. Neon from the Switchyard Tavern spills across a scuffed wood floor, country rock low under the chatter. Wyatt Collins and Wren Collins, fraternal twins in plain jackets and worn boots, take the corner booth facing the door. 2 sodas, a basket of wings, backs straight, eyes soft but alert. They look like locals finishing a long week. The door cracks open. 2 officers stride in, boots wet from leftover snow, voices clipped, scanning hard. A slurred complaint from a barfly becomes the fuse. Those 2, been eyeing the register. Heads swivel. A bartender pauses, mid-pour. Phones tilt up. The officer's vector straight to the twins. IDs. Now. The tone carries weight and assumption. Wyatt's hands stay visible on the table. Wren slides her license out, slow, calm. They answer politely. No edge, no heat, yet the pressure builds. Step outside. Hands on the wall. You fit a description. Wyatt glances at Wren. One look. A lifetime of signal. They don't want trouble. They don't want a scene. But they won't be humiliated, and they won't let this bar become another story of fear. What the officers don't know is simple. Wyatt and Wren Collins are FBI. They know the law, live the law, and won't break under it. The Switchyard Tavern was half full and holding its breath between songs when the door let in a blade of desert cold. The wind pushed through like a rude guest, rattling the neon beer sign and brushing sawdust off the floorboards. Wren Collins and her twin sister, Wren, sat where they always chose to sit when they could. Corner booth, eyes on the entrance, backs to the wall, hands clear. 2 sodas, sweated on coasters. A basket of wings cooled between them. They looked like any other pair closing out a long week. Plain jackets, scuffed boots, easy posture. The quiet shifted when Travis Hogue and Dana Reese came in. Their boots left wet prints. Hogue walked like he owned the aisle, tall, jaw clenched, chest squared, so his body cam faced the room like a third eye. Reese held herself a step behind and off his shoulder, steadier, scanning faces and corners, listening more than speaking. They didn't browse. They already had a target. At the far end of the bar, the drunk who had summoned them, Carl Dugan, in a stained trucker cap, lifted his chin and jabbed a sloppy finger toward the Collins sisters. Them, he mumbled, loud enough to pass as confident. Been eyeing the register. The claim was paper-thin, and it still sliced. Hogue came straight to the booth and stopped hard enough that the table trembled. IDs, now. No hello, no context, just the order. Wynn didn't reach. She kept both palms open on the table. Evening, officer, she said, steady and plain. Can you tell us what this is about? Reese answered first, voice level. We had a report. You 2 fit a description. Wren placed her napkin down. A small square of white against dark wood, then lifted her eyes. What description is that? Calm. No heat. The question was shaped to be heard clearly by a microphone and anyone replaying it later. Hogue shifted half a step to his right, angling his body to narrow the path out of the booth. IDs outside. Let's go. He wasn't shouting, but he let the words carry. Distance from witnesses had its uses. Wynn took a slow breath. We'll provide identification here at the table, she said. For everyone's safety, our hands will remain visible. Phones began to rise like prairie grass finding wind. A pair of Northern Arizona University students near the jukebox tilted their screens to frame the scene. One whispered, "Rolling." Behind the bar, Jess Hartley, the bartender with a steel spine and a soft voice, set a pint down and tapped a finger at the ceiling corner where a small dome camera watched the floor. She didn't call out to the officers. She didn't have to. Carl, sensing attention he hadn't earned, slurred, knew they were casing it. Saw him look twice. They were up and down. Sneaky. He had not seen any such thing. He had, however, seen the bottom of his glass more than once. Reese's eyes flicked toward Jess and then back to the booth. "We can verify things quickly," she said, a hint of procedure trying to surface. Hogue didn't take the hint. "Stand up," he said, louder. "Hands where I can see them. We're not doing this in a crowd." Wren kept her palms flat. "Officer, are your body cams active?" she asked, eyes steady on his vest light. "Rolling," Reese said. Hogue's jaw worked. "Rolling," he echoed. "Thank you," Wren said. "We're willing to show ID. We'd like to remain inside, in view of witnesses and cameras. What is the specific allegation?" "Theft complaint," Hogue snapped. "You fit a description from a call. You've been watching the till." "We've been seated since we walked in," Wynn said, and nodded once toward Jess without taking her hands off the table. "She can confirm our tab time." Jess didn't move closer. She raised her voice just enough to cross the room. "They've been in that booth since I dropped the wings. Tab opened at 1938. POS shows it." The room narrowed to breathing and small sounds. A glass set on a mat, the hum of a refrigerator fan, the low thud of bass under the talk. A retired Forest Service ranger at the bar straightened slightly, the habit of attention returning to his shoulders. He didn't lift his phone. He watched like a man who knew what watching was for. Hogue leaned in, the booth shadow darkening. "IDs. Outside," he said again. The same words, heavier now, as if repetition made them lawful. Wynn nodded slowly. "I'm going to reach for my wallet with my right hand," she said for the camera and the room. "It's in my back pocket." She looked at Wren. "Keep your hands on the table." The instruction was redundant. It also calmed the air. Wren didn't blink. "I will keep my hands visible," she said. Then to Reese, "Ma'am, would you mind stating your name and badge number for the record?" Reese gave them. "Officer Dana Reese, 4281. Hogue followed, each digit clipped. "Officer Travis Hogue, 3119. Wynn edged her wallet out and set it beside the basket of wings without opening it. Wren did the same with hers, deliberate and clean. Neither sister broke the frame of the camera or the phones. The licenses rested inches from Hogue's hand like a test in plain view. Proof offered, control retained. "Step outside," Hogue said for the third time. "We'll talk where it's quiet." "It's quieter in here than it is on the sidewalk," Wren answered, as if commenting on the weather. "And safer for everyone." Carl gave a little laugh and tried to turn the room his way. "Told you," he said to no one, the desperate tone of a man trying to keep a lie upright. The students' lenses didn't move. Jess eased the music down a notch with a finger, and the neon hummed a little louder. The tavern drew in on itself, a circle of witnesses around a table where nothing dramatic had happened yet, and where the next sentence mattered more than most sentences do. The officers had made contact on a flimsy complaint and a vague radio note. They had demanded movement and distance. The twins had declined to be swept into the dark outside, had shown their IDs without surrendering the camera, had asked for the reason the law required. Phones recorded. The bartender pointed to the eye in the ceiling. And in that watchful quiet, thin as glass and just as easy to break, the confrontation reached the edge of what it would become. Hoag's next stand-up came louder, shaved of patience, and he slid his hip half an inch farther into the aisle so the booth's only clean exit ran past his shoulder. The movement was small, practiced, and unmistakable. Blocking. His right hand hovered near the holster, thumb flirting with the snap, not a threat on paper, but a message in every room like this. Reese held her tone flat and procedural. "Let's step outside, we'll sort it out." But her boots planted wide, and she mirrored Hoag's angle enough that the path to the door felt like a funnel. Carl, drunk on attention, fed himself to the silence. "You people always got answers," he said, the words sloppy and pointed at the same time. He grinned as if he'd landed something clever and no one in a uniform corrected him. The students' phones rose a notch higher. Jess's jaw tightened around a word she didn't say. Wren's fingers stayed flat on the wood. She inhaled on 4, exhaled on 4, and let her voice match Reese's cadence exactly, softened by half a note. "For the record, your body cams are active." "Thank you for confirming that," she said, making the confirmation live inside the room again. "We've provided identification. We will not consent to a search. We prefer to remain in view of independent witnesses and CCTV. Wynn nodded, a metronome disguised as courtesy. "Officer Hoag, Officer Reese," she said, tagging their names and numbers like anchors. "Please state the specific, articulable reason for detaining us." Hoag's eyes cut to the licenses, then to the phones, then back. "Description from a call," he snapped. "Theft complaint here. That's enough. Outside." His volume climbed another notch, not shouting yet. He wanted the room to feel it. He leaned and let his fingertips drift toward Wren's shoulder, a frisk in the shape of a question he hadn't actually asked. Wren didn't flinch, didn't recoil, didn't gift him the word resist. "Officer," she said gently, "a frisk requires reasonable, articulable suspicion that we are armed and dangerous. Do you have that?" She phrased it like a teacher asking a student to show his work. For half a heartbeat, the lights answered. The neon over the window fluttered. Overhead fixtures flickered once, twice, before holding. The room breathed in. Phones jittered in hands and steadied. Somewhere behind the bar, the old cooler kicked on with a thunk. Radio static cracked in both officers' shoulders. Dispatch bled into the tavern. "Unit 3, be advised. Possible 484 at Pine Mart, 2 blocks east. 2 males, dark jackets, 1 ball cap, 1 beanie. Last seen heading north." The words drifted across the sisters' plain clothes like a net cast too wide. Hoag's jaw set. Carl latched on. "See?" he crowed, pointing at Wynn's jacket as if fabric were gilt. "Matches." "It does not," Jess said, still in place, voice clean and neutral. "They've been seated 30-plus minutes. I opened their tab. The timestamp's right here." As if on cue, the tiny tab printer chirped and spat a slip. Jess glanced down, frowned. "That's odd," she murmured, then lifted the paper where the nearest phone could see. "System just tried to merge Carl's tab with theirs." Carl's laugh broke, then returned, thinner. "Computers glitch," he said. "Sometimes people do too," the retired ranger said mildly, not looking away from the scene. Hoag's thumb clicked the holster strap open, a sound smaller than a sigh, louder than a thought, and his hands rose toward Wren's forearms, the move to cuff telegraphed by the set of his wrists. The students' cameras sharpened. The little red rectangles around faces locking like quiet jaws. Wynn kept her hands where they were and let her voice wear velvet over steel. "Officer, please don't escalate," she said. "Our hands are visible. You have our IDs. We will not answer additional questions without counsel. We do not consent to any search of our persons or property. If you can articulate a belief that we're armed and dangerous, we'll submit to a limited pat-down right here." in view of cameras and witnesses. Wren matched the tempo. "We're calm," she said, the words slow enough to fall into the body cam audio like pebbles into a clear pond. "We're using indoor voices. Please do the same." Reese's eyes moved. Phones, Jess, the CCTV bubble, the printout, the licenses, Hoag's hand. "Travis," she said, low and professional, "we can verify the timeline on camera. POS and CCTV will take 60 seconds. Hoag didn't want 60 seconds. He wanted motion. "Stand up," he ordered, louder now, expanding to fill the tavern. "Hands behind your backs." The students' lenses drifted to frame Jess and the printout, the sisters and the body cams, the ranger and Carl, the whole geometry of the room, a tight wedge of control pressing against a table that refused to tilt. "Officer," Wynn said, "for clarity on the recording, are we detained and not free to leave?" "Detained," Hoag snapped. "Thank you," Wynn said. "Then we will remain silent beyond identification." She looked at Jess without moving her hands. "Ma'am, would you state the open time on our tab again?" 1938, Jess said, holding the slip steady as a witness oath. "And the camera sees this table." Carl tried one more nudge toward a bad decision. "They circled the till," he lied, swallowing the wobble in his voice. "I saw it." "No," Jess said simply. "You left your stool 3 times. They never left their booth." Hoag's shoulders squared as if bracing against the room itself. His hand hovered over the invisible line between contact and force, between a search that could be justified on paper later and a restraint that would look like punishment now. The flicker, the radio, the tab glitch, each stray element tugged at a narrative that wanted to run downhill, confusion as cover, speed as safety, distance as control. Wren met his eyes, steady and not unkind. "Officer Hoag," she said, speaking to the camera and the man at once, "we respect your job. We're asking you to respect the law's steps in front of these witnesses. Keep this inside. Keep it verifiable. That's safer for everyone." Outside, sirens grew and then faded east, like a tide choosing another shore. Inside, breath gathered in ribs and throats and stayed there. If Hoag pushed, the room would split. If Reese pulled, the night might hold. And in the hinge of that pressure, voice raised, aisle blocked, a hand poised near the holster, a frisk waiting to be named. The twins' calm refused to give him the excuse he was reaching for. The camera lights kept blinking. The printout kept existing. The law's language kept landing on the recorder. And the tavern, suspended on a thin, humming wire, waited to see whether power would accept verification or insist on itself. Wren didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She let the room hear each word as if it were being set on a shelf. "Officer Hoag," she said, eyes on the chest camera's faint pulsing light. "A frisk requires specific articulable suspicion that we are armed and dangerous. Please state that basis for the record." She didn't challenge. She invited. It made the question heavier than a push and clearer than a dare. For a thin second, the tavern seemed to study Hoag with her. The body cam's red LED winked. The phones in students' hands drifted tighter, their mics greedy for syllables. Hoag's fingers hovered over the air between request and force, then lifted off Wren's sleeve an inch, as if the word specific had edge. Wind slid in behind the opening Wren had created, voice steady as a level. "For clarity on recording," she said, "we invoke our right to remain silent beyond identification. We will not answer further questions without counsel. We invite immediate verification right here. POS timestamps and CCTV will confirm we have been seated for approximately 30 minutes. She didn't look away from Hoag, but her words reached the room like an announcement to a jury. Jess, already holding the slip the printer had coughed out, answered like a court clerk called to read. "Tab open 1938, she said, tapping the line with a short, neat fingernail so the nearest phone could zoom and focus. "Food dropped 1943. They haven't left the booth. Cameras up." One of the students took a half-step left to frame Jess, the tab, Wren's hands, and Hoag's vest light in a single plane. The other student whispered, "Got all four," and the little red recording square locked like a seatbelt. At the bar, the retired ranger's chin tilted a degree, an old field habit saying "I'm tracking." Hoag's jaw ticked. The choices in front of him were suddenly sharper, not because the room had grown hostile, it hadn't, but because the room had grown clear. He could call Wren's language lawyering, crank the volume, and move to cuff with "officer safety" stamped on the tape. Or he could let the camera see what the camera was designed to see. The low-risk, high-truth answer sitting 10 feet away in a register roll and a dome lens. Reese felt it too. She broke the beat with a procedural breadcrumb. "Let's verify on camera, Travis," she said, pitching her tone toward policy rather than pride. 2 minutes. We keep hands visible, we stay inside. We resolve or escalate based on what we see." Her eyes flicked to Wren and back, acknowledging both the ask and the law behind it. Wren held still, not seized by the need to add more, letting specific articulable suspicion do the work. The phrase hung in the air like a rung on a ladder, clear enough to climb, high enough to deter a leap. Carl tried to cut through with noise. "They're slick," he muttered, pushing the lie's last fumes into the open. "You people always—" The ranger shifted a fraction, not menacing, just present, and the rest of Carl's sentence died where his teeth met it. Wynne kept the momentum narrow and provable. "Officer Reese," she said, "thank you for your badge number and confirmation the body cam is rolling. For the record, we appreciate an on-scene verification rather than movement outside." We remained seated with hands visible. Jess nodded toward the ceiling bubble. "Camera's got this table," she repeated, and reached the remote for the monitor under the bar. A grainy, factual square lit up under the counter. She didn't turn it to the crowd, didn't grandstand. She called out what it showed. 1939, food. 1951, Wren grabs napkins. 1958, Wynne reaches for hot sauce. No one up from this booth. The phones didn't cheer. They didn't need to. They hummed. Quiet, insistent witnesses wired straight to 1,000 future eyeballs. The power that had gathered around Hoag's posture began to bleed toward the most boring object in the room. The time stamp line. Reese took the opening she'd made for both of them. "Ma'am," she said to Wynne, eyes still on both sisters' hands, "stay still." "Ma'am," to Wren. "Same for you. Jess, keep reading." Then to Hoag, almost under the noise floor. "This is clean. We check. If it holds, we clear them. If it doesn't, we act." Hoag's shoulders were made of argument. He could feel the pull to control the scene, to reject the idea that the room's facts could set his pace. But the radio on his shoulder crackled again with Pine Mart updates. Units closing, a suspect headed north. The call he wasn't on was still moving with, or without him. In front of him, the law's language, their language, was recorded in full sentences he'd have to answer later, not just tonight in a tavern. He didn't step back. He did something smaller. He stopped advancing. The aisle he'd been shrinking regained an inch. His hand left the hover near the holster and came to rest on his vest, 2 inches from the camera lens that had made promises to everyone. Wren gave the moment its name, gentle enough to be heard and not provoke. "Thank you," she said. "Verification is the safest path for all of us." Jess called another timestamp. 20:05, music volume down, still seated. She lifted the merged tab slip with 2 fingers. "And the system tried to mash Carl's tab with theirs 3 minutes ago," she added, neutral but audible. "I'm splitting it back." Carl shrank a little in his own shirt. The ranger's eyes didn't leave Hogue. The room's alignment changed like a tide shifting a sandbar. It wasn't applause, it was posture. Heads leveled, shoulders softened. The tavern's collective nervous system stopped bracing for the hard clang and started hoping for the clean click. Phones kept recording, but less like shields and more like records. When Reese spoke next, the room was already leaning toward her choice. "Wynn Collins, Ren Collins," she said, using their names on purpose. "Keep your hands where we can see them. We're going to verify POS and CCTV. If it checks out, we're done here." Hogue held that line in his jaw for a breath longer, then gave the smallest nod that could still count. It wasn't surrender. It was allowing, and in that allowance, the complaint began to collapse under the weight of timestamps and angles. The power that had been pressed into a single order, outside, redistributed into a process that could survive daylight. The room didn't exhale yet, but it began to remember how. They could have ended it with a flash of leather and metal. Wren's credentials sat in the inside pocket of her jacket. Wynn's were tucked behind her wallet, clipped and ready. A quick reveal would have stopped the scene cold. Stunned silence, apologies, the uneasy shuffle of a power reversal. But reveals carry weight, and weight leaves dents. Tonight wasn't about spectacle. It was about whether a process could right itself when it leaned. So they let the law's furniture do the lifting. Jess kept one hand on the register printout, the other steadying the bar's small monitor that mirrored the fixed-angle CCTV. The screen wasn't cinematic. Flattened colors, quiet pixels, a clock in the corner that marched forward with bureaucratic confidence. The camera didn't love anyone. It simply watched. In the recorded square, the Collins twins appeared as 2 fixed points. Front corner booth, never leaving the frame except to reach for napkins and hot sauce. No loop around the till, no drift toward the register, no choreography that matched Carl Dugan's halting narrative. Reese stood closer to the monitor than to the twins, her body still between enforcement and verification. She didn't emote. She read. 1942. "Food drop," she said, eyes on the corner clock. 1950, bartender to the register. She watched Jess's shape move in the grain, watched Wynn's hand rise for a wing, Wren's for a napkin. 20:05, volume down, subjects remain seated. Hogue stayed in the aisle, posture no longer advancing but unwilling to admit retreat. The body cam on his vest faced the twins and caught the monitor's reflection on the brass rail, enough to put an outline of the same facts into his recording. The radios had quieted after the Pine Mart update. The urgent thing was now somewhere else. "Carl," Jess said mildly, lifting the POS printout to the level of his eyes, "explain the tab merge." Her voice carried no accusation. It didn't need one. The slip was clear. An attempted combination of 2 tables into one. The register can be clumsy, humans more so. Carl blustered. "Glitch," he said, a word that often hopes to outrun the truth. But the system's log, printed below the subtotal, showed the keyed command. Jess had watched the input history too many nights to mistake tap for error. The retired ranger didn't move, but his presence had the gravity of someone who would sign a witness statement if asked. The students' phones kept their silent vigil, the red squares steady. Around the room, suspicion lost its seat to sequence. Narrative, Carl's, ran into order, Jess's, and order held. Wynn let the evidence breathe. She didn't rush into the silence with victory. She gave Reese the space to do what she was beginning to do: own the verification. "Officer Reese," she said, measured, "thank you for checking the timestamp and camera. For the record, we appreciate staying inside, within sight of witnesses and body cams." Wren added only what was necessary. "If you need to contact a supervisor, we're comfortable showing credentials to them directly," she said, calm. "We won't display them on the floor. We don't want to create a spectacle." That wasn't coyness. It was control. Credentials are more than plastic. They are keys, and keys should be used like scalpels, not hammers. Show them to the wrong audience at the wrong time, and a simple correction becomes a headline with a half-life. Reese nodded once, still reading. "Copy," she said. "Hold there." She angled her shoulder mic away from the room, keyed it, and kept her voice low. Status language, no drama. A brief exchange, location, check ongoing, potential supervisor contact if needed. When she let the mic fall back, she didn't move to cuff. She moved her eyes from the clock to Hogue. "Travis," she said, just above the hum, "POS shows 31 minutes seated. CCTV shows no movement to the register. The complaint is inconsistent." She didn't say false. She didn't need to. Cameras say it better. Hogue's jaw worked once, twice. Power often prefers movement to admission. Process prefers proof to motion. He looked from the licenses on the table to the screen under the bar to the student's phone lenses trained on his own camera. His options didn't disappear. They clarified, doubled down, or let the facts collapse what had been inflated. Wren kept her hands visible, voice cool as tap water. "For the record," she said, "we've complied with identification and remained calm. We continue to withhold consent to search. We request closure on the detention based on the verified evidence." Jess turned the register roll enough to catch another small detail. "Also," she said, tone neutral, "Carl's tab shows 3 trips off his stool during the time he claims he saw them circle. Camera corroborates that, not theirs." Carl shrank another size. Someone farther down the bar coughed, the social cue for shame without a mob. Reese straightened by degrees. Procedure had given her footing. The room had given her air. "Ms. Dugan." A slip. Then she corrected herself with a brisk, "Mr. Dugan, we'll speak with you in a moment." Then to the twins. "Wynn Collins, Wren Collins, based on verification, you are no longer detained. Thank you for your cooperation." No cheer rose. That was the point. The correction felt like tightening a jar lid, not slamming a gavel. The phones kept recording a boring truth. 2 people stayed seated. Evidence stacked where it should, and a claim lost its shape under the simplest light. Wynn inclined her head. "Thank you for verifying," she said. She didn't reach for her credentials. She didn't need to. The win belonged to process, not to her. Wren's shoulders dropped a millimeter, the body's way of marking a safe turn. Hogue cleared his throat. He wasn't ready to apologize. Men rarely are with an audience. But he was also not moving toward cuffs. And that was the only apology the moment required to keep the night from bleeding. "We'll wrap this up," he said, to Reese, to Jess, to the room. Reese gave the final instruction that made closure official on camera. "Hands remain visible for another moment," she said out of habit. Then, "You're clear." The factual basis for detention didn't shatter. It dissolved, its edges softening until the room couldn't remember a time they were sharp. The tavern pivoted from suspicion to clarity, without theatrics. No badge flashes, no raised voices, just the slow satisfaction of a record corrected in real time. Music edged back up by a notch that felt like permission. Neon hummed. Outside, the wind made the sign flicker again, and this time, No one looked up. The room settles into its answer. In the restorative version, Reese gives a quiet apology, no theatrics, just the word that matters, and jots a brief note for training. Verify in view, articulate before touching, keep witnesses inside the frame. Jess separates the tabs, thanks the twins for their patience, and slides the receipt without charge for the wings. Hogue doesn't find a speech. He finds stillness and lets it stand. Wind tips, Wren thanks the room for staying calm, and the booth empties without ceremony. Proof that closure can be ordinary. In the procedural version, a supervisor arrives, listens without hurry, and asks to bookmark the body cam clips. Reese summarizes the timeline. Jess provides the POS printouts. The students email their footage at the supervisor's request. A brief note is opened on the false report, not as revenge, but as record-keeping. If the same caller lights the same fuse again, there will be a history to compare against. The twins decline to press anything. They prefer the file to the fight. Either way, the final image is the same. The music rises to its old volume, phones tilt and lower, and the winter air nudges the neon in the window until it hums like a heartbeat rediscovered. Wynn and Wren step into the cold with shoulders level and dignity intact. A night salvaged by patience and tape. By morning, the ripple is measured. The bar posts a short statement. We appreciate everyone who stayed calm and verified. The precinct circulates a succinct policy reminder about on-scene verification and witness retention. Jess tapes a small card near the register. CCTV active. A neighborhood group floats a community forum on respectful stops and better calls to dispatch. The message is simple enough to last. Power is strongest when it accepts verification. Dignity under pressure and calm, documented truth keeps a tense moment from becoming a needless wound. Now we want to hear from you. How would you handle a moment like this? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from, and hit like, share, and subscribe for more stories that challenge, inspire, and thrill.